This terminally ill man is the third most wanted notorious hitman in Taiwan. But one day, he suddenly begins to desire more fame after realizing that he's not as popular as the first two criminal. Following this discovery, he decides to eliminate the other two to boost his popularity. However, while doing so, he finds himself in a twist of fate and deception that afterward changes everything he knows. Hey guys, welcome back to IM Movies. Today we're looking into the 2023 film called The Pig, the Snake, and the Pigeon. But before we jump into the details, be aware there are spoilers. Now let's get right into it. The movie begins as a man named Chen Guilin casually infiltrates the funeral of Boss Hung, a high-ranking gang leader. The funeral of Boss Hung is attended by rival gangs, and this is where Chen Guilin meets a gangster named Goldie. Goldie tells Chen Guilin about how a crazy, dangerous hitman called Guilin Kid killed Boss Hung and blew up his casino just after retrieving a debt Boss Hung owed. Goldie further reveals that his own boss, Ironhead, has issued a kill order on the Guilin Kid. Shortly after, the two introduce themselves and Goldie stares in shock upon hearing Chen Guilin's name, realizing he's been speaking with the Guilin Kid all along. Moments later, gang boss Ironhead's presence gets announced, and Chen Guilin swiftly kills him on the spot. The Criminal Investigation Department, led by police detective Chen Hui, surveilling the funeral, swiftly moves into action upon hearing the gunshot to apprehend the culprit. Detective Chen Hui spots Guilin fleeing the scene and immediately goes after him. After chasing Guilin for a while, Detective Chen Hui catches up with him and the two begin to fight. However, Guilin damages one of Chen Hui's eyes and afterward manages to escape unharmed, making him a fugitive on the run. 4 years later, Dr. Chang, an underworld doctor who mainly treats bullet and knife wounds for gangsters, informs Guilin that his grandma, who happens to be his only surviving relative, is dying. Dr. Chang had been helping Guilin check up on his grandma ever since he ran away 4 years ago. Upon Guilin's arrival, he realizes that his grandma has been taken in for surgery, and Dr. Chang comforts him. After the surgery, Guilin receives the news of the unfortunate passing of his grandmother, and Dr. Chang later reveals to him that his grandmother never spent any of the money he had been sending, except for a $300 watch she bought for herself on her last birthday. Guilin tells Dr. Chang that he only went silent for those 4 years because he feared his grandma would be heartbroken to see him on the news, adding that since she's now dead, he's back to do something big that every criminal will fear him for. However, Dr. Chang tells Guilin that the report of a previous x-ray he did is out, and she informs him that he has stage 4 terminal cancer. She further reveals to him that he only has 6 months max to live, urging him to do what's right by turning himself in to the police. Meanwhile, Detective Chen Hui approaches Dr. Chang to seek information about his location, knowing he'll be around since his grandma just passed away. However, Dr. Chang denies ever seeing Guilin, stating that she only works as a caregiver in an elderly nursing home. Motivated by his impending death, Guilin decides to turn himself in to the nearest police station, but the police officers couldn't recognize him, and they rudely order him to wait in line. While checking the notice board, Guilin realizes that he is not popular, despite being the third most wanted person in the country behind two notorious criminals Hong Ki and Bullhead. With this, Guilin decides to accomplish something big before his death and become the most wanted criminal. To do this, he determines to eliminate the other two to secure the top spot. Later that day, Guilin visits Dr. Chang, who is having a lunch date with her son and his friends. Guilin asks Dr. Chang for the location of his first target, Hong Ki. However, Dr. Chang refuses to tell him, stating that she's not a snitch. After this, Guilin visits Goldie, who now works as a bartender. After revealing his ailment, Goldie informs him about a miracle doctor in a place called Taiwan. The next day, Guilin kidnaps Dr. Chang's son in exchange for Hong Ki's location. With this, Dr. Chang reveals that she only met Hong Ki 20 years ago when he got a bullet stuck in his skull, but she knows about a girl named Xiao Mei who has supplied the drug that Hong Ki has used to treat his migraine headaches for the last 10 years. Guilin also asks Dr. Chang about Bullhead, and she reveals to him that he disappeared a long time ago, showing him the last letter Bullhead's mom left for him from an elderly care center. The next day, Guilin sees Xiao Mei buying drugs from a pharmacy, and he instructs Goldie to release Dr. Chang's son to her. As Guilin trails Xiao Mei, he realizes that Hong Ki is hiding in a hair salon in Taichung with 3 of his boys. Guilin then decides to lodge in a hotel just opposite the salon as he begins to spy on Hong Ki. Later that night, Guilin discovers that Hong Ki has been threatening and manipulating Xiao Mei, using her as his sex slave. The next day, Guilin goes to get a shave at Xiao Mei's salon in an attempt to talk to her. Moments later, Hong Ki walks in and Guilin decides to leave. However, Hong Ki refuses to let him go, claiming that he wants to perfect the shave. Afterward, Hong Ki reveals that he knows Guilin has been spying on him from the previous day. Following this, Honke begins to cut Quilin, who at this time is also pulling out his gun to shoot, but they suddenly get interrupted by police officers, who came to complain about a car that is wrongly parked on the road. However, Xiaomei uses this opportunity to collect Honke's knife and calm the situation. Afterward, Honke and his boys leave the salon, and Xiaomei warns Quilin not to come back again. Later that night, Honke ties Xiaomei to a chair as he begins to sexualize her. Meanwhile, Detective Chen Hui arrives at the salon in Taichung after tracing Dr. Chang's call record. At the same time, Quilin kills Honke's driver and proceeds to go kill Honke. However, Honke hears his footsteps approaching and he quickly grabs his murder weapon. Honke tries to notify his boys of the danger by turning on the salon light, but Quilin attacks him, and they soon begin to fight. Afterwards, Honke attempts to escape and Quilin goes after him. However, Detective Chen Hui spots both of them and immediately goes after them. Detective Chen Hui catches up with Quilin and they both begin to fight. However, Quilin focuses on killing Honke instead, chasing him down to an abandoned farm. Soon, they both begin to fight again, and Quilin ends up killing Honke by shooting him. Afterward, Quilin goes back to set Xiaomei free, and afterward kills Honke's remaining gang members before driving away with Xiaomei. The next day, Xiaomei reveals to Quilin that Honke was married to her mother, who has been serving a 15-year prison time for him. With this, Quilin gifts Xiaomei his car and leaves to find Bullhead, his next target. So, in an attempt to find Bullhead, Quilin goes to the care home where Yang Shuchen, Bullhead's mother, used to live, and they soon inform him that she's been dead 3 years ago, but no one came to claim her ash. The care home hands over Yang Shuchen's belongings to Quilin, and he discovers a letter from a place called the New Spiritual Society. Following the address on the letter, Quilin boards a ship to an island and later arrives at the spiritual house in Penghu County. They warmly welcome him and soon offer him food. Later, they all attend a meeting where the leader of the spiritual society, called His Holiness, addresses the people about how owning earthly things can deprive them of getting enlightened. Soon they begin a music session where His Holiness walks around to greet the people. At this time, Quilin begins to feel uneasy and tries to take his lung cancer treatment drug. However, Quilin suddenly begins to vomit black water before he can swallow it. Afterward, His Holiness tells Quilin that there is something unclean inside him and promises to help him get rid of it as soon as he gains his strength. During their next meeting, the lead singer testified how she survived terminal cervical cancer after she met His Holiness. With this, Quilin begins to realize that fate has led him to the right place. Afterward, His Holiness invites Quilin and asks him what brought him to the island. Quilin reveals that he is looking for a man named Lin Luho, stating that he has come to deliver something personal to him. However, His Holiness takes Quilin to a burial site that reportedly belongs to Lin Luho. He further reveals that Lin Luho died in an ER after receiving enlightenment, which in turn birthed the creation of the spiritual society. Afterward, His Holiness encourages Quilin to let go of his earthly possessions and free himself from their attachments. Afterward, Quilin gets initiated into the spiritual society, crying and confessing to let go of his earthly possessions. The next day, Quilin does an X-ray scan and the doctor reveals that his stage 4 cancer is now healing, stating that his cells are self-destructing and that he'll be fine in no time. With this, Quilin decides to dedicate the rest of his life to the spiritual house. First, he buries his gun and other possessions. Quilin further surrenders all his money and the wristwatch his grandma gave him to be burnt. The next day during breakfast, Quilin is instructed to serve a food for a young boy who had come to the spiritual society with his mother. During the meeting, the kid suddenly begins to vomit black water. Quilin immediately picks him up and rushes him to the hospital. Later, men from the spiritual society arrive and they soon begin to argue about a certain required dosage. It soon becomes clear that they've been adding a poisonous substance to the food of newcomers to make them feel sick, in order to prove that they have an unclean spirit within them and then trap them in society. Moments later, Quilin, who had been inside, bumps into them, and one of them slaps him for interrupting His Holiness. Soon, Quilin sees the doctor walking into his office to attend to the boy's mother with the same X-ray that was used for him. The doctor reveals to her that her son has a chest infection, but the woman protests that her son has always been healthy. Afterwards, the woman begins to beg His Holiness to help save her son, and His Holiness promises to help take out every unclean thing inside the boy. At this time, Quilin begins to suspect foul play, and later that night he decides to investigate the matter. He starts by searching the kitchen for any poisonous substance but can't find any. Then he proceeds to check His Holiness's living room, where he finds a hidden passage that leads to an underground apartment. Meanwhile, at the same time, the boy's mother has been manipulated to surrender all her earthly belongings to be destroyed in the furnace, including all her money and even her wedding ring. At this point, Quilin discovers that they've been deceived all along as he sees the woman's belongings drop from the faked furnace. Quilin also discovers a shelf filled with belongings that people had surrendered over time, and even discovers his own box, but he only finds his wristwatch in it. The following day, Quilin storms in as they initiate the boy's mother into the spiritual society. Quilin reveals to her that she has been deceived, showing her supposedly burnt purse and wedding ring as evidence. However, the men quickly wrestle Quilin, and they later manage to pin him down. Shortly after, His Holiness pulls out a knife and asks the woman to kill Quilin. At this point, the woman realizes she's in a big mess, so as soon as she collects the knife, she kills herself instead. Shortly after, one of the men stabs Quilin, and they lock him in the same box as the woman. Afterward, they carry the box to an open field and bury it. Moments later, Quilin breaks out of the box and immediately goes to confirm Bullhead's burial site, only to find it empty, with the picture of Lin Luho and his mother, Yang Shuchen. At the same time, the lead singer reveals to His Holiness that she's pregnant with a child. The next day, after digging out his gun, Quilin storms into the spiritual center and kills one of the men working outside. Quilin then confronts His Holiness in the meeting area, exposing him to the notorious criminal known as Bullhead. However, Quilin notices that the bullet in his gun is jamming as he tries to shoot Bullhead. Seeing this, one of the men tries to quickly attack Quilin, but he manages to shoot him dead. Shortly after, Quilin shoots Bullhead in the shoulder and goes ahead to expose his evil deeds. Then Quilin promises to spare Bullhead if his bullets should jam after 9 attempts. However, Quilin ends up shooting Bullhead in the head on the 3rd attempt. Afterward, Quilin decides to leave the place, but as soon as he hears them singing again, he goes back and promises to give them 1 minute to leave the place. Immediately, some of them run away, while some decide to stay as they continue singing. After the countdown, Quilin begins to kill them one after the other, but still considers sparing the ones that his bullet jams at their turn. Finally, Quilin kills the lead singer and immediately boards a ship to leave the island. While on the boat, Quilin borrows a lady's phone and makes a call to Detective Chen Hui. Upon arrival, Quilin, who had taken the lady hostage, sees several police special operations teams, who had come to arrest him alongside several news agencies waiting to interview him. At this point, Quilin realizes that his goal has finally been achieved, and he turns himself in, smiling as they take him away. Months later, Dr. Chang later visits him in prison, and afterward reveals to him that she is the one with stage 4 cancer, and not him. Dr. Chang also tells him how she wanted to manipulate him to turn himself in, as a way of removing one criminal from the world before she dies, but she's happy it later turned out the way it is, stating that she ended up using 1 stone to kill 3 birds. After getting a death sentence, Detective Cheng Hui gets Xiaomei to give Quilin a clean shave based on his requests. While getting shaved, Quilin begins to cry, knowing that his time is up. After that, Detective Cheng Hui gives Xiaomei a gift from Quilin, and she soon realizes it is the wristwatch, Quilin's most prized possession. On the day of Quilin's execution, he apologizes to everyone he has ever hurt and signs a paper. He then eats his last meal, and finally, they take him to the execution ground, where he looks up to the sky before they end his life. If you'd like to see us recap any other movies or topics you have in mind, just drop a comment and let us know. And don't forget to hit the like button, share this recap, and subscribe to stay updated for the next one. Until next time.